Welcome to the Mason Dukacek Show. And before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by WorkforceAlchemy.com, helping leaders uncover hidden profit leaks inside their business operations. Bob Levinstein is a Stanford educated and street smart, battle tested entrepreneur who has built and scaled high traffic online platforms serving millions and millions of users. After experiencing firsthand the operational strain of managing sales, fulfillment, and customer service at scale in one industry, he made a pivotal shift. Instead of optimizing the model, he reinvented it and took on a whole new industry. Today, as CEO of CruiseCompete.com, he runs a marketplace that connects cruise buyers and sellers in a way that removes friction and creates value on both sides. What makes Bob different is his ability to see what breaks as companies grow and design smarter systems that fix it. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
When your earlier platform in an entirely different industry than the one you serve now was at its peak, roughly how many visitors were you getting each month and how many of those were repeat users?
Well, that company was called Nation Job. It was one of the first online job listing services on the internet. We actually started that one in, what year was that? 1988. We started that even before the internet was really that prevalent. And I think at a peak we were seeing somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000 individual users coming to the site looking for jobs.
So that gives people an idea of size. If I recall, if it was before the internet, weren't you even doing it like with when you first started, like floppy disks and stuff, weren't you?
Yeah. When this started, we talk about friction. This started with me going into the career center at Stanford and trying to look for a job. There were just binders of possible jobs. They were all completely out of date, and it was just a fairly useless place. And it just seemed obvious to me that this should all be computerized, not the most original thought in the world or the most revolutionary thought in the world. But that's what we try to do. And so what we would do is we would put actual, I think we started out with like 386 machines, PCs that, probably the computing power, you'd have 100 of them just in your phone right now. But 386 PCs. And originally we tried updating via modem, like a 2400 baud modem to call in and send the updates. And that largely did not work very well. We ended up switching to mailing floppy disks to, at one point, I think we had, about 350 locations that we were mailing disks to. So it was quite the operation to get that done.
So when the internet came, how did you shift?
It was somewhat gradual because, we were, we started doing, we had an online system that we built that was sort of next to the other system. And then just over time, as it became more and more obvious that this was the way everyone was going, that we would have the access, people would have the access to it online. We phased out the standalone systems. That was a very happy day when there were no more folks out there. Because there are
So
always issues with, computers breaking and going down, and somebody unplugged it so it didn't update, and they forgot to put in the disk, and all sorts of things like that. It was quite frustrating.
so I know that when you finally hit your stride, marketed, you were one of the top 5 online job boards in the country. I guess there was like Monster
At
and
some
Hot
point,
Job.
yeah.
And what did it actually take behind the scenes to sell, deliver, and support that volume of business day to day? Because I know your strategy was different in how you marketed and provided service. What'd that
Yeah.
take day to day?
Well, it's when you have a marketplace, there's always going to be a chicken and egg problem, right? You need the jobs to get the users, to the job seekers. You need the job seekers to get the jobs. And so we had a method of what was called community sponsorship. So we would work with chambers of commerce to have them get their key employers together, and we would have a one price kind of program. Various iterations of this, but the basic idea was everybody who was a chamber member could list their jobs on the website. The other issue we had with that was back in the day, it was not that easy for people to get their information online. So, and to take it from one system to another system, So we had people faxing us jobs that people would retype. We had a whole data entry department that did, it was basically necessary for a lot of these smaller employers and, or people who they just were kind of too lazy to do it themselves. And so there was a whole, I don't know, we probably had at one point 20 people doing data entry. So it was quite the operation. There was a lot of pain. And then of course you have a lot of the sales, which was it's difficult to manage. And the problem with that is, well, we had customers who would stay around for a long time. There were also customers who had needs, this month, and then they weren't hiring. So why should they be paying for this? So that was also a problem.
So, as far as pain points, selling, providing service, providing updates, providing staff to cover the
Yeah.
issues that were coming up, were there any other particular pain points that were really making it stressful for you to continue trying to grow this thing?
Well, at the core problem with it, I can only see with hindsight. Would be nice to tell you that, I saw it going in, but really, we learned things through our mistakes. The core problem with this business is that the value delivered was not aligned with what people were paying. And the reason, and what I mean by it is this: let's say you have a hospital that always has 100 job openings because they're a big hospital. We're charging them a flat fee, and if they got lots and lots of extra value because they had so many job listings, we weren't capturing that upside. All we're capturing is that I think it was, probably about 5 grand a year they were paying us, right? And then you have smaller guys that, yeah, we can provide value, but the cost of selling to them, especially when they aren't constantly needing, yeah, I need this, I have this important search now. I've got to fill this position. Okay, we find you this guy, and hey, it's worth, 15 grand to you because you found this one guy. Tomorrow you don't need that guy. And so it was a lot of sales is extremely expensive. It's probably the most expensive thing in most businesses. You have to have a sales force. I don't think people realize just how expensive sales is. And when the life cycle of that customer is not, hey, I made the sale, I have this big upfront cost to make it, but now I've got a customer for life. You can be wonderful at what you do, but if they don't have a need, they're not going to keep paying for it. And that's what would happen. There's a lot, it's obviously employment's very cyclical. And once you lose all those customers, going back in to get them again, you may be dealing with different management. Somebody wants to try something different this time. There are other opportunities. So it was very Sisyphusian. There was a lot of, we're pushing the rock up the hill, the rock rolls down. And so that was a big problem with that business. Yeah, there were plenty of repeat customers, but not enough. And it became very difficult to grow.
So, how do you know when operational complexity is a temporary issue versus a sign that the model itself is broken?
When things come easy, it's usually a good sign you're doing something right. When things come hard, you've got to take a hard look at yourself and what's going on. One thing I found in general, the hardest lessons to learn, especially as we get older, you'll see this more and more in your life. The hardest lessons to learn are unlearning things that worked for you in the past. When you were a high school athlete and when it hurt, the answer was push harder, keep going, do more, push through it. When you're not so young anymore, like you and me, something starts to hurt, you stop. Because if you don't, you're going to have 6 weeks of trying to recover from pushing too hard. Back then it was, hey, I'm training for this game or this race or this whatever. Now I'm not in a hurry. I don't have a deadline. I don't have an Ironman coming up, that I got to make, try to get ready for. I just want to be fit, want to improve. I want to make improvements, but there's no timeline. So you got to be smart, smart, smart. And always being taught growing up, if you work harder, there's got to be a time when you go, this ain't working. Let's do something else. It took me way too long to learn that lesson. I stuck with what I was doing with Nation Job for much longer than I should have.
Well, and one of the reasons you did is you were successful at it and you made what many of other people would consider a fantastic living. You employed a lot of people and by many folks watching, listening's definition, you succeeded. But I know you well enough to know that you weren't getting happiness from it. It was a frustration. And there's a lot of people watching and listening that I'm sure are sitting there going, they can relate
Yeah,
because They've got all of this time, energy, skills, talent, context invested in this one venture or this one business that has been part of who they are for so long. And the fear of pivoting or shifting or doing something different keeps them where they are. And one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you on is because I think you're an inspiration for those people that are there to say, hey, good good gets in the way of great, but you'll never know great as possible unless you're willing to give up on the and pivot from the good. And you are a living, breathing example of someone who's done that. Can you walk us through maybe the moment or period when you just decided, I'm not going to fix the model, but I'm going to replace it entirely and take on an entirely different industry where you could use what you already learned and just get a fresh start?
Sure. I didn't go cold turkey from one to the other. I had been on a couple of cruises and I just realized it dawned on me that in order to get the best deal, I had to call around to a number of different travel agencies because the prices are not and the offers are not exactly the same agency to agency. The agents have flexibility to close business. That's the way the cruise lines want it. They have some rules, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. But ultimately, shopping around makes a difference. But you can't just the other thing I learned about it was you can't just randomly shop around. You have to know which agencies are likely to have the best deal for you. And that just seemed to me a very, very similar idea, matching a job seeker with a job is very, very similar to matching a travel agent with the consumer who wants to buy a cruise. And really I just started cruise compete for fun. The other business was going. We had some prospects of some pretty big government deals. Spoiler alert, they never came through despite all sorts of promises. And I had some extra time in my hands waiting for some of these things to happen. And just thought, this could be fun, something different to do. Maybe it brings in a few dollars a month. Great. But I just saw something that I thought could be done better. And so we built a system to do that. So the way Cruise Compete works, as a consumer, you come in, you have uh, all the cruise itineraries are in there for about 50 different cruise lines. You pick the cruise that you want to go on, the ship, the sail date. You put in a little extra information, who you are, what type of cabin you want, passenger ages. And then that's like a little mini RFP. So it's like lending tree for cruises. You put in your information, and then we have a couple of hundred travel agencies that can come in. They can see your request, and then they can come back for their best price. As a consumer, you're anonymous until or unless you decide to contact somebody and you can compare the various offers. Some may be equal in price, but have different benefits. Cabin upgrade, who knows? You can read about the agencies. You can see the agency's ratings from other consumers, and then you decide if you're interested. You want more information or to book. You contact the agent directly. So it's just basically, here's what I want. Give me offers to compare. I pick it, and then I can go in and book. Then the agencies come back to us and they report that information, and we charge them a fee based on the value of the travel. And what this did was this model eliminated a lot of the problems that we had in the first model. Typically, um, it was very easy. The way we do this is since the agents are only paying us based on success, we're capturing all the upside. So one agency, does 100 bookings, we're getting paid on every one. Another agency only does 2 bookings because maybe they don't have very much time spent on the system. We're still capturing that. And what they're paying is relative to the value that they're getting. And I think just as a general principle, people don't really understand that. When people talk about, oh, well, minimum wages should be higher. No, they've got to be relative, to the value that people are creating. Now, my salary should be higher. It's relative to your replacement value. And it has to be. Because if it isn't, if your replacement value is lower than what you're being paid, you're out of here. It might be a computer doing your job. It might be 2 young people they can pay half. Whatever it is. But those things have to be in sync or the system doesn't work. In this way, we eliminated the need for sales because the pitch to travel agencies was very simple. It's like, look, it's free to sign up. You can come in, you can see these quote requests. You only pay me if it works. And even then, you don't pay me until the first of the month after the ship sails. So cruises often are booked, 18 months in advance, 2 years in advance. Our average dollar is probably 7 months out. And one of the problems in the job was budgets, right? Well, yeah, we need these people, but my HR budget is X. I only have this much money to spend, and when it comes time for renewal, oh yeah, my budget got cut. Sorry, I can't renew. All right. Again, there's a disconnect between value. I need the people, but I don't have the money to advertise for 'em. Here, that's never an issue because as a travel agent, you come to CruiseCompete, you can quote to your heart's content. By the time you're paying us, the first of the month after the ship sails, you pay us on a credit card. By the time that credit card comes due, you already have your commission in here. So it eliminates that cash flow problem. It eliminates budgets. So it was very, very easy to sign up agencies. And several of my top agencies are sometimes it's not the same agency name. Sometimes things have changed, but they're the same people that I signed up in 2003 before we launched are still there with me.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have this very, very long term on customers there. And we have something like 1.5 million consumer accounts on the system. Have we're doing about 250,000 actual cruise quotes go through each year. So it's the scale's there. But because I don't have to, we don't have to have Salesforce. About 3 times a year, I do a seminar webinar where we email out to travel agencies and say, hey, look, do you want to come? And, we'll tell you about what this is. And that's it. And we have no lack of travel agencies. You know, the offer itself is so good. It's like, look, as a travel agent, you got one thing to sell. It's your time, right? And here's a way that you can access customers that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. You can use it when you want to use it because it's not a sledgehammer. It's more like a Swiss Army knife. I only want to quote high end cruises. You can do that. There's a filter in there. You filter out everything. You only see the high end. I only do these 2 cruise lines. You can do that. I only want to quote when things are slow and the phone's not ringing. You can do that. Okay. So it's flexible enough to fit for the agents themselves. And the other nice thing about it is it's very self-managing and self-selecting. The agents who are good at this, who can quote a lot, who can get better offers because of their relationships with cruise lines, they're going to survive and hang around. The ones that don't, they go away, and that's fine. Our goal is bring people in, let them try it, require them to do 300 quotes, or they pay a membership fee. So I give them that choice, hold their feet to the fire so they can find out if it's going to work for them. We in the early days, we had people come in, they would quote, they do 3 quotes. Oh, I didn't get a booking. This doesn't work. So it's, hey, if you're going to waste my time, you know, you're going to pay me. So it's
Fair enough.
really the benefit of that is not the membership fees that we get, because often people who don't do it, their credit cards are bad, et cetera. The idea is I get rid of people who are not serious, professional, good travel agents, and that helps keep the quality high. So a lot of these things work to self-regulate it, and there's kind of a harmony to it of how that works. The consumers that we get, the more cruises you've been on, the more likely you've heard of us. And so the easier it is for the agents to work with you because you don't have 50 questions. I mean, look, first time I took a cruise, I knew nothing. The agent had to spend a lot of time with me explaining this, explaining that, or this is better, that's better. Once you've been on a few cruises, you know those things. So it's just a much quicker transaction for the agent. So even if they're not making quite as much money, because they're paying us, because they're giving back an onboard credit, they're spending way less time. And as a travel agent, you have one thing to sell, and that's your time. So that works well for them because it starts to sort out the people who are not customer.
So I know when you had Nation Job that let's just contrast that for those people that are listening or watching. Let's contrast that with Nation Job. You had to sales, you had to have support to key in all the response for people that were, as you said, were too lazy to type stuff in or didn't have the time. You had to, I'm sure, customer
Yeah,
service calls.
some of that back then.
What's
They
that? Okay. So you're talking sales, you're talking customer service, you're talking like operations. That's a lot of different moving parts and headaches. And from what I can gather, you decided that I don't want to do this again, but I'm going to apply my knowledge and experience in a different way. And instead of saying I'm going to build a business for an industry, you created a marketplace instead where you don't have to do any of that stuff. You don't have to sell it because you got the agents doing it. You don't have to provide service because the agents are doing it. You're only providing value as a fraction of the additional revenue that, or you're only generating revenue as a fraction of additional revenue and value you bring to others
Right.
that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
And that you're saving your
And
end
and
user.
more than that, that's clear to them because that's something. Well, I'll give you a good illustration of that. So in the early days, before we launched, one of the ideas was, all right, well, different cruise lines have, cost, are more expensive than others. So commissions are higher. And we'll charge people per quote. And we'll make the quotes, and I came up with a whole schema of how much we're going to charge for, this cruise line and, based on how many days it is and this. And it was complicated. And then one of my then partners said, let's survey the agencies and find out how much they think they are spending for leads. And the short answer was they had absolutely no idea how much they were spending, what it was costing them to get a lead, because they didn't track. So they had absolutely no idea. They weren't going through where, okay, if I spend, 5 grand on advertising, how many leads am I getting? What percentage am I closing? They had no idea. So it becomes very difficult to charge somebody for something when they have no idea the value. And that was the problem with Nation Job was, what's the value of getting an engine, getting one engineer? The value was there from what we did, but they didn't track stuff. They had no idea what was going on. And we were also dealing at a level of HR where HR does not get much respect in most industries. And they can't go to the CEO and go, look at the value of this. And there's a big disconnect there. So it's not just that you have to deliver the value, but the customer has to understand that value. And this way we avoid that conversation completely. Like, look, it's free. The downside of it is, yeah, we gotta wait to get paid, but that was okay. I'd actually implemented that model very successfully with a network um, of headhunter network, right? Where basically we took all their jobs and we put them on Nation Job, and then we would just get if they, we would get a percentage of that those big old headhunter fees if they made the placement. And I think we did $250,000 one year. But there just became lots of other options for them that were cheaper. People willing to do this for less, do that for less, which was silly because obviously, if you get a candidate from somebody else, great. But if you don't, it's an opportunity cost, right? That eventually that went away after a couple of years. But to trust them and go, all right, we're going to do this on an honor system, and you're going to tell me, and you're going to pay me if it comes through. And that was something people looked at as you're nuts to do that. We have come up with a number of ways to keep people honest, but mostly it's doing business with honest people. It's the way that works. And the ones who are not, you'll see it pretty quickly. We have all kinds of fairly sophisticated mathematical things to look at, and what's this ratio to that ratio. But mostly, we feed them back to the people. It's like how many of your bookings came in because the user reported it to us, and how many came in because you reported it to us first. Let's keep that number high. And they take it seriously. They when you show them the stuff, because most people, almost all people, I think, are basically honest and they want to do a good job and they want to be fair with you. Our agents appreciate what we do for them, the ones that are successful on the platform. The ones who are not, we're not doing anything for them. They're not doing anything for us. It's okay that they go away. It's best for everybody, right? And so there are just a lot of self-regulating things that go.
So how do you know when a market is ready for a buyer seller marketplace versus a traditional service model?
It really comes down to, I guess there are a number of factors. The most important one is, can you buy the same thing, roughly the same thing, from different people and pay different prices or get different value. That's one. So, airline tickets, for example, it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to pay the same price. So that doesn't make any sense. The other thing too is the buyer really has to understand exactly what they're buying. They have to be able to communicate that exactly to the seller. So that's a second issue, because we've talked about all sorts of different markets, diamonds, beauty salon products, searched a bunch of different things, but it's really got to be an apples to apples. Because if it isn't, great, I've got two different proposals, but I don't know which is better. Third issue is geography. This becomes a lot more difficult to do if it matters how close you are to talk to a guy in a bar in Washington D.C. who does junk removal from people's houses, has trucks. You go in and I think we actually probably used him after my mom passed away to clean the house out, right? And he's got different competitors who do that. Probably makes a lot of sense, because you can go look how many square feet of the house, where you're located, but you would still have to do it regionally, because you're not going to drive the truck, 8 hours to go do this. It no longer makes sense. So there are things that the model fits, there are things that it doesn't. We talked about doing it for a fractional airfare kind of stuff, for jet share type things. I've got a private jet that's going from one place to another. I got empty seats. Probably work for that, maybe. But again, you got the problem of, well, how many people really want to do this, and how do you get to scale, and how many are willing to pay, that extra. So it depends on the market. There are a lot of factors that go into it.
What are some of the biggest mistake leaders make when trying to build a marketplace that serves both sides well? Because you serve cruise users and you serve cruise sellers very well. Where do you think some of the mistakes leaders make?
I think you really have to understand what people want and what they're doing and what their concerns are. For example, I've talked about how a big mistake we almost made was going out with a model of, pay per quote. Each time you quote somebody, you're going to pay us $1 or $3 or $10. Again, the big problem with that is they had no idea what the value of that. They had no idea what they're paying per lead. If we didn't understand the travel agent, as far as that goes, we would have failed. And another thing about that, it really comes down to feedback. You have to make it very, very easy for your customers to tell you what they don't like. That first year, we made so many software changes, really adding features of, hey, I want, because when we started, I don't think we even had filters to filter out certain cruise lines. That, I think, was a travel agent request suggestion. And even recently, in the last three years, maybe 4 years, because we've been at this since 2003. Somebody said, "Look, can we have a cabin hold form where if somebody wants to hold a cabin, they give us all that information that we're right now taking over the phone, which is, your name, your address, your age, your birth date, all these things that the cruise line needs to hold the cabin. Can you give them a form they can fill out and send it to us?" And that's made it a lot easier for agents. It's made it easier for people. I hate having to give my info over the phone when I know I can type it a lot faster, or even as soon as the form comes up, my computer fills it in for me. It's looking at those points. And I think that's true in any business. You've got to put yourself in the customer's shoes. It reminds me of when we were in that hotel in Colombia, when you came down for my wedding, and the executives there had never spent any time in their own hotel rooms. And there were just so many problems, little things, not big things, but something as simple as the bed is this height, the nightstand is this height, it's a little tiny round table, and there's no way in the dark you're going to get your phone on it on the first try. There was no outlet right next to the nightstand.
And that was a 5-star hotel.
Yeah, so this is a 5-star hotel. At breakfast, there isn't salt and pepper on the table. By the time, I can get the waitress over to get me salt. It's a buffet. So by the time I can get the waitress's attention, she's busy. I ask her to bring me salt and pepper. I've already eaten my meal. Now, to their credit, the next morning I came out and there was salt and pepper on every table. So they listened at least to that. But you've got to go through this as your customer. Don't assume you know what your customer wants. Don't assume that that you know better, or assume that, oh, well, they'll do this. And I see these friction points just so often. I've got a site that I go to read my comics online, like the old newspaper comics. I do that every day. When I go to it, it takes me directly to the homepage, not to my list of the ones I want to read. Now, I think there's a way around that. I was just thinking about that this morning. I think I can probably link directly to that page, depending on how their site works. But I have to go through, I go to the main page, then I got to select this, then I got to go to the menu, and then I got to select that, and then it puts up what I want. I'm doing this every day.
So
It's
here's the
just,
interesting thing. Here's an interesting thing that I hope people watching and listening are tuning into, because you said something very, very important. Hey, we thought this
yeah,
paper quote thing was going to be great. That one decision by itself, one decision could have made the difference between success and failure.
absolutely.
One decision.
We absolutely would have failed. There's no question about it in my mind.
And to have everything else, you've got a brilliant idea. You have, and you've proven it. You have a very, very successful company that you have proven that it is a very, and it could have been a disaster
Yeah,
because of one simple decision. And you chose to listen to your customers and let them tell you. It's like find the customer's itch and scratch it, but you got to ask them where they itch.
yeah. And part of the issue on that, I think that goes deeper. That just kind of this goes more to a real life philosophical thing. Is I've always noticed that people's greatest strengths tend to be their greatest weaknesses at the same time. And kind of a core, and that's one, mull on in your own life, and you'll see it, and see it in people you know. But another one is, it's really important to know what gets you excited personally, what gets you jazzed, what are you, what are you passionate about? There are two things. One that plays into, what your strengths are, but it also plays into, be careful, you're probably doing too much of it. You're probably chasing that too much. So I'll give you an example to make that a little more concrete. For me, it's taken years to realize, but what really gets me excited, what I really love to do, is find a problem, solve that problem, and then have that problem solved going forward, right? Not a thing I have to continually solve and fix. And that's what gets me excited. I mean, what did CruiseCompete do? It took the hassle of, okay, I know I can get a better price, but I got to talk to 16 different agents and compare, et cetera. Whereas, oh, I can just go to one spot, and the agents are already giving me their best offers because they know they're competing. I can compare all on one page. I can save some money, and I can save a bunch of time, and I can save the hassle of, oh, wait for somebody to get back to me. So it just makes it nice and neat. The thing about that is, I'm always chasing that high, right? So, for example, at one point I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if when you went in, okay, well, here's my cruise, but with one click I can see the flights that are going, and I can buy my flights there. With one click, I can see, hotels that are, before and after, because they're in the port city and they already have my dates, and where spend a bunch of time chasing that. And the reality is, people want to buy flights the way they're used to buying flights. They want to buy hotels the way they're used to buying hotels. Maybe they're, Hilton Honors or Marriott Bonvoy or whatever it's called, and they're going to go to the Hilton site and they're going to buy there. Maybe they like to go through Expedia for their flights, or for me, I'll buy some stuff through Expedia because, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And or for my American, where I have a lot of status, I buy through the app on American. They don't want this. Not useful to them. Spend a lot of time trying to make that work, but it doesn't. I'm solving a problem that didn't exist.
And it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, that it should be, if you're doing it right, it should be easy.
Exactly. And that was, we sold some hotels, but not that many, and it was not worth the hassle of doing it. It just didn't work. Insurance, that was another thing, cruise insurance. People buy this stuff, travel insurance, yes. But people don't buy it, if they're going to buy it, they'll buy it while they're talking to the agent. They're not going to buy it online. We went through several different iterations. Oh, groups and, large convention type things. Tried that too. We went through several different iterations. just not the right way to sell it, not the right platform to sell it on. It's not something that you want people bidding on. It's something where you really need to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, who can walk you through all the alternatives. It's, yeah, just people sometimes buy a group of 20 cabins through a shore. It happens. But it's real. We're not set up for corporate. It's just not, the model does not work for it.
So how long did you typically try these different ideas before you
Oh,
came to the conclusion of like, hey, because there's a lot of folks listening and think I've got a brilliant idea, I can make this work, and they persist and they persist and they persist, which I respect. But you have the ability to a unique ability to be able to say, this is a long enough test to decide this doesn't work, where a lot of people would persist on trying to prove their hypothesis. How do you
yeah, I don't have a
decide?
unique ability. I have battle scars because I certainly wasted a lot of years on something that trying to make something work that was not going to work. And I think everybody should be required to play poker and learn how to play poker. Because you'll find in your personal life and whatever, because when you get a hand that starts to look good, looks good on the deal, and the flop comes and those cards don't match your hand, people do what's called chasing. Well, I think and maybe, and they lose a lot of money that way. I mean,
That's a great
see it,
point.
you can see it right now in Iran. They've lost. They've lost big. The sooner they admit that to themselves, everybody is, well, we're gonna keep fighting because what's right. No, you've lost. You've already lost. The sooner you recognize that, the better off you're going to be. The better off your children are going to be. But we get attached to these things. We get attached to these ideas. And again, looking at it as, what really gets me excited, like my former partner who passed away a couple of years ago, she loved new ideas, and that was her greatest strength. She'd always come up with these, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And there was a lot of value we got out of that. But at the same time, she was so enamored with these things, she'd insist on us, going down and trying stuff that I could tell was not going to work from the beginning. And then some stuff that I couldn't, we tried for a while, and she, well, if we just did this, we just did that. It's like, no, this group thing is never going to work. We did 2 different iterations where we designed stuff. And in the first one, you said, oh, well, it didn't work because we didn't design it right. Okay, we did it again. Well, it still wasn't. It's like, no, the idea was bad. You get in writing, as a creative writing, they tell you, if you write something that you really love, it just, well, it's great, throw it away right away because it's probably not going to work. You know, you get too enamored of it. You can't get too enamored of these things. And you just got to know what it is. If you can't recognize in yourself what kind of things do I get very excited about, you won't recognize when you've gone too far and when you've got to toss it.
That your analogy of playing poker makes so much sense because like I can look back as I'm listening to you, I can reflect on decisions I've made where I have persevered when my hand wasn't that great.
Yeah.
Now I might have learned new skills and I can rationalize it in hindsight, saying I learned new skills and made new contacts, etc. But hindsight being 2020, I should have pivoted. I should have shifted. I should have changed. And I didn't because and it
But we
wasn't.
fall in love with this stuff, oh, I had this great idea. It makes me feel good because I had this great idea. I'm pursuing this idea. It makes me feel good. Mm, you lose perspective, and it's natural. I mean, it happens to everybody. It's who we are. But the more that you know about yourself and what gets you excited, the more you can see those danger signs.
See,
Because
I really love some of the themes that you're hitting on today. Just as a theme through here, like number one, doing stuff that you're passionate about, what gets you jazzed and what gets you excited. And hey, if you're doing it right, it should be easy. It's almost like it's been a while since I've shot a basketball, but the last time I shot a basketball and played on a regular basis, by the time it goes off my fingers, I know it's going in. I don't even have to watch. It feels perfect. It's easy. It's a flow. It's a rhythm. And you don't even have to watch it. You know it's going in and it's easy.
yeah.
It's the ones that are forced and awkward and difficult that's a prayer. And I think a lot of that same what you're is talking about is the same thing business wise. What should a business owner do when they are trying to remove themselves as the bottleneck without losing control of quality?
Okay. Well, the important thing here is to understand what a business is and isn't. And, it's not something to give you prestige. It's not, I feel good about myself because I've got a bunch of people working for me, or, look at how many square feet we have leased. It's not about any of those things. It shouldn't be about any of those things. I remember way back in the early days was out in California, and it was with some original partners and something in actually what became Nation Joe. It was, oh, well, we've got to get, it's all about getting funding because it's validation, right? All these things, I guess the common theme is validation. Should never be about that. Should always be about bottom line, how much profit are we making? And it should be about um, how little work do I have to do to get them. For me, any task that's repetitive, either somebody else is doing it, we've automated it, or we pushed it outside the organization. Um, I didn't get a ton, frankly, out of my Stanford experience, but I did come out with a number of heuristics. And in one of the things in organizational behavior, they talk about are buffering and bridging strategies. Bridging strategies mean you push it outside the organization so somebody else does it. And you can see that obviously in CruiseCompete, where it's the travel agents who are doing the interaction with the people. Yeah, we get an occasional customer who, the website's designed, so there are not a lot of questions in how to do it. It's very straightforward. It takes you through A, B, C, D. But yeah, there's some people who have questions. Fine. I've got somebody who does, spends a few hours a week total in, answering those queries, and that's fine. But it's not me. Right? Anything that can be automated, you automate it. None of our stuff is automated with artificial intelligence, by the way. It's all, stuff that we've just simplified, made it so you don't have to do it. And then also it comes down to strategies about, how do we eliminate, and talk about how we eliminated sales. Another thing I didn't want from the beginning was to have, we had a department that did collections, billing and collections. One of the things that I wanted to do early on, this was back in the day. Now, everything's electronic. Everybody's used to doing everything electronically, right? But back in the day, companies were used to paying for stuff by check. A company check, you send us an invoice, 30 days, we pay that invoice. I didn't want to have all that. And I said, and I was thinking the way to do that is to put credit cards require. We now have credit card in ACH, but credit card was absolutely required, and there's no other way to do this. And we had pushback from agencies about, we pay everything by check. I said, look, you can, we don't have a company credit card, fine, put it on your personal credit card, get reimbursed. But this is the only way to play. This is the only way we'll do it. And in thinking about that, I came across there was a travel agency called CruiseWeb. I don't know if they still exist. They had the worst website. It was, this was back 2003 timeframe, right? And it was just like this black screen with these horrible neon colors on it. And they said, we will not talk to you. We will communicate only by email, but we get right back to you on the email. And because we can do this, we are, you'll get the best deals. And they did very well, and they were quite well respected. But seeing that gave me the courage to go, yeah, you know what? I'm okay saying no to customers. You gotta be willing to say no to customers. And that's where things get off track. I remember discussions, debates back at Nation Job about, we got to get rid of this data entry. The time has come. People have access to the internet. They can do this shit themselves. It's cost us too much money. It's too much of a headache. And it makes the company unsaleable, which ultimately it was unsaleable, even after we got rid of it. But there was a lot of pushback. Oh, what about, they've been doing this for years and this and that. And then we got rid of it, and it really didn't have much of an effect. But you get married to these things.
They refer to that as the sacred cow.
Right. Exactly. Another thing that what's the other one more recently? Oh, yeah, I know. Okay. For customers, we had some of what we do is we have a mailing list of about 400,000 people. Cruise lines will do, email blasts that we, will charge them for this. And some of them are like, well, if you can put together the HTML on it and do that work for us. And we lost a person who was employed doing that, and now we're just sort of doing it ourselves. And we just started saying, look, we don't have anybody who can do this. No. And the answer was, oh, okay, we'll figure. And there's some customers you're going to lose that way. But generally, you got to keep your organization lean. You got to stay in your lane. You got to do what you're good at doing, and you can't do stuff that's distracting from the mission. You can't do stuff that, oh, I'm gonna have to have another person to do this. You can't do stuff that's going to add to your weekly calendar to manage. I have very, very little. The only stuff that I do at this point, with maybe one exception, is stuff that nobody else can do, that I can't automate and I can't have somebody else do. And really, the only thing on that list is our once a month we bill our folks, and the way we do it is this: when the travel agents enter their bookings, they essentially create their own invoices as they go, because we know what the sale date is and we know what the dollar figure is we're charging them off. And then once we get to the first of the month, we just have a list of here are all the things we need to charge. And it's on one side of the screen is what we need to charge. On the other side of the screen is first the credit card thing. And we copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And then we just pull up the one for the ACH, who wants to do ACH transactions, and copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And it's 45 minutes to do all of it and stuff. Which brings me to another good example of what companies do wrong. Well, I'm in the process of leaving Authorize.net, the credit card process. They're owned by Visa, and their software's terrible. They just had a major software upgrade to make it more modern, and it's still terrible. I went into one of the fields is the email address field. Okay, and I have some agencies that are .travel in their email address, and when I put that email address in, it says this email address is not valid. So I sent a note to customer service and said, "Hey, your system is rejecting .travel email addresses, and you need to fix that." And they said, "Oh yes, our system only accepts email addresses that have a 3-letter domain extension." I said, "Perhaps you don't understand the concept of customer service. When something doesn't work, that's called a bug. It's your job to fix that bug." Oops, sorry, I thought I had that muted. "It's your job to fix that bug. In other words, make it work." And there are other things on that they really are not in the they're just not in the mindset of the users. Another thing on that is you can sort your list of customers, which is great. And because alphabetically, because I have all the stuff alphabetically here. But the problem is, if I just click on it to go in and do the chart, and then I go back, it loses my whole sort. And I got to go back and do it again. The only way to make it work is to open it in a new tab, do it in the new tab, and then remember delete that tab and then go back to the other one.
They're
In
making
fact,
it hard work to be a customer.
yes, exactly. Because I don't think anybody has sat down and went, all right, I'm going to be a customer and just do this as a customer.
Well, it's just like the hotel you were talking about earlier in Cartagena. It's a
Right.
five-star hotel, and they didn't know the customer experience because none of them had stayed in their own hotel as a guest.
As a guest. Exactly.
What are
So
some
I'm switching to this new company we're switching to. Oh, another thing in there, again, not listening to the customer. Oh, there's Authorize.net, and then behind them, there's the bank, the actual merchant processor, right? They were been overcharging us quite a lot. I just hadn't noticed because I didn't set it up in the first place. And I finally went in and I talked to them like, look, we've been a customer for years. You've been overcharging the hell out of it. What can you do? Like, well, we can cut this much, but you have to sign a 3-year contract. And I said, look, the fact that you want me to sign a 3-year contract tells me there are better deals out there. So, give me a actual good deal, or I'm going to find one of those and we're going to leave. And that was their best offer. So, and then I found a company called Stacks, which Stacks said, look, their whole pitch, his whole pitch was this: look, there are 2 parts to what you pay. There's what the Visa and Mastercard are charging you. Nobody has any control over that, and then there are fees on top of that. We charge you a $250 a month flat fee, and that's it. The other guys are going to make it really complicated so you don't understand what you're paying them and what you're not. And he was 100% correct. And so it's like, all right, I'm moving here, and their software's better. So we're in the process of moving. It's going to cost me some money up front, not too much, but I'll be in better software going forward. And it's the first guys, if they had just gone, do we want to get a little bit of money from these guys for doing absolutely nothing? Because they do absolutely nothing once you're a customer, right? It's all automated. Or do we want to get no money? And they decided we prefer to have no money. I don't get it. Certainly not in the mind of the customer, that one. The authorized.net, obviously, they don't care. It's like, yeah, we know this is a problem. We've been knowing this is a problem for years. We're just not going to fix it. Is it a complicated fix? No. There's a software line of code that validates if it's a valid email address or not. All you have to do is dump in all the different domains into that, and you're done. Yeah, we're not going to bother. Okay. You don't have my business.
Can you share a specific example of a company that impressed you operationally and what they did that others are missing?
I can absolutely do that. I am not a handy guy. I am not a real man when it comes to fixing stuff around the house. But I just installed a new thermostat because when I'm in Colombia and my child is in and out of the house because he's at college not too far away and he's back and forth a lot, he tends to touch that thermostat and make it go, and run up my bills. It's fine. He wants to turn up the heat or the AC when he's here, but he's here and then he's not here for 3 days. So I wanted an automated thermostat that I can control from wherever I am, usually in Colombia, right? Uh, this thing says, okay, installation. First thing you do, install our app. App comes up. What do you want to do? I want to install a new thermostat. Okay. Step one, here's a picture of what your current thermostat looks like. Take it off the wall. Step two, go turn off the power. Step three, here are these different wires. Before you do anything, we've got labels for those wires to put on those wires. Step, which wire, which ones are connected, by RC, whatever. Tells me exactly step by step, screen by screen to go through, do everything, connect it to the internet. Absolutely idiot proof, which I need when I'm doing something like this.
Color by number. Color by
Yeah,
number.
exactly. And with pictures. And it's like, look, if you don't understand this, here's a video, but I understood all of it. It was very clear and just walks you right through the whole thing. That was brilliant. It's called Sensei, I think. Yeah. Sensei without the E. Yeah, Sensei. And it was just, whichever one was most highest rated on Amazon is the one I bought. I don't need anything really fancy. I just want to be able to, turn off the AC when there's nobody home. And it does all that. So I was very, very impressed with that. And I come across examples all the time. I mean, wish I could remember the name of the other company, VoIP phone. I'm with a company called Intermedia. They're spectacular. They're $35 a month and their price never goes up once you're with them. They have all of the features that I want. I don't mess with it very often, but when I needed to put on an auto attendant and all that stuff, which has been wonderful because it gets rid of all my spam calls. I used to get a ton of spam calls. Um, it's a little bit complicated. They got somebody right there to walk you through it, and then once it's done, it works. They've been and the guys I had before. Shit, I wish I could remember their name because I want other people to avoid them. But I just had all kinds of problems, and then they wanted to raise the price on me immediately, and it was worth throwing away the $200 I spent on their phone to make the switch because it's just these guys make my life so much easier, so much better.
So how do you train yourself to recognize opportunities that are hiding inside of operational frustration? I mean, that's another theme that I've noticed through here. Like when you talked about I was a college student at Stanford and I saw these binders and the job listings were outdated. I mean, that was a source of operational frustration for you. And hey, when you're at Nation Job, or when you're looking at your cruises, like, oh, I just want to be able to get deals faster. Like you have for recognizing opportunities that are hiding inside of operational frustration. Any
Biggest
input or thoughts?
as I have a very thin skin for things that I don't like stupidity, and when things could have been done smarter, especially easier, and I see waste. It's, gee, why do I have to go through opening a new tab for 100 different charges each time when that could just be automatic? You know, keeping managing state is in software is not that difficult, and it's that technology's been around for 25 years. But so things that annoy me. It's like this could be easier, this could be quicker. Where am I spending my time? And I'll give you an example of how you can get caught up and stuff. Back in the day, we're much better now, but we used to have gaps where we wouldn't have a certain cruise itinerary.
You'd have a what?
We wouldn't have a certain cruise itinerary on the site. So somebody would come to the site and we'd have a link that said, hey, can't find what you're looking for. Click here. They'd send an email. It was really missing. I would, send them a note back that said, "Hey, I've sent your stuff to, this agent. We're working on getting this itinerary on the site, but in the meantime, you can, you can get at least one quote from these guys." And I was doing that myself and going, "Oh, I have these relationships with these individual agencies, and they get these from me, and I give them to different people, and I'm building trust and whatever." And that was all bullshit. We just automated it. They just went off, saved me time, probably made zero changes. Another thing we used to do, we used to have annual awards. We used to do it in September on the anniversary of, when we launched. And, we'd send out gift baskets to agents who did this and that. And eventually realized that it was a hassle. Dresses were wrong. This didn't show up. Why, whatever. I eventually realized people don't really care about that stuff. It wasn't doing us anything other than we're spending money and we were creating work for it. And we just stopped doing it and nobody said anything. You know, if there had been 15 people going, "Oh, I really love that. Why'd you do it?" And I felt appreciated, honestly, they didn't care. So, okay, why should I? Right. But part of that was I was kind of in love with that idea. It was my idea. We're showing these people how much we appreciate them. We do depend on them to, to report stuff accurately, tell the stuff, and we want them to love us and all that. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a good idea. And you've just got to be able to got to be able to recognize those things. And it's hard. People who are entrepreneurs, we're idea people. We do fall in love with ideas. If we didn't, we wouldn't be entrepreneurs, right? We wouldn't go, "Oh, I believe I have a better way of doing this." That's who we are. It's in our, in our DNA, as they say. But you got to recognize when it's not serving you. And you can't fall too in love with that idea. And you just got to go look, all right, this didn't work. I'll have another idea tomorrow. It's fine.
I've always felt that frustration is your friend.
Yeah.
That's a call to action to pivot or to make something better. And if it's not within your power to make something better, or the juice isn't worth the squeeze, that it's going to take too much time, energy, and resources to make it better, that's when you pivot.
Yeah. And honestly, it's so much easier now than it used to be. It's, oh, I have this issue in the house that I want to do X. Oh, I'll look on Amazon and there's probably somebody who solved that. Most of the time that's true. But if nobody has, there you go. There's your next business. It's not, it's really very easy in this day and age to know what's out there and to be able to, be able to jump on things. And it all comes back to that pain point. What's frustrating?
So, looking ahead, how do you see marketplaces evolving, and what will separate the winners from everyone else?
I think it just really comes back down to those basics. How easy is it to use stuff? I mean, Amazon makes my life a hell of a lot easier. I don't have to, people, "Oh, well, Jeff Bezos shouldn't have all this money." I bless Jeff Bezos every goddamn day because there's stuff that I need and I can get it. I mean, I'm in Colombia now as much as I'm in the US, and it's not so easy down there. And you really see the difference of, yeah, I want this. Well, you can order it. It's going to take 6 weeks, or you got to go around shopping, or it just doesn't exist down there. I'm going to import it from here. I'm going to pay probably some stuff's not so bad. Some stuff I'm paying triple, depends on the value of it. Had my certain weight set, the power block.
Yes.
Want to get one of those? Well, I found the dealer in Chile was the closest one, and it's like, yeah, we can get it to you, but the cost of getting it to you with the shipping and taxes, the import taxes, it's going to be triple what it would be just buying. So I look at other ways of maybe importing. But you appreciate how much easier so many people's lives he's made. My life is way, way better. I want something. I just 3 clicks. Okay, it's there. I don't have to remember it. I don't have to keep it on the list. And I know I'm getting a good deal on it because if there were a better, if people could make money selling it for less, they would be on Amazon. It's a very competitive marketplace. Sure, there's probably a little bit of graft going on in there, but in general, it's a good deal. And that's really what it comes down to. Is it easy to use? Are you solving a problem or solving a real problem, not just one that you think might be there? Again, and I've stumbled down these roads of, I think this is a problem, and it turned out not to be. People didn't care. So
So,
those are,
if people want to know more about you, cruisecompete.com or what you do, what are the best ways for them to connect and learn more?
Um, Certainly, they can get to me through CruiseCompete. Absolutely, the contact us will get to me. It's if you're looking at taking a cruise, absolutely we can save you some time and save you some money. System very self-explanatory.
Thank you so much. The wisdom that you shared today and the time you shared today is very much appreciated, and I hope those listening and watching learned as much and appreciated as much as I do. Thanks so much for taking the
Oh,
time.
I've enjoyed it, my friends. All righty, take care.